I think when we started, we were so focused on what we cared about, what we thought, which was the
Mm,
sustainability factor in compostability and end of life. And after getting to know who our consumer really is and what they care about now, really the message is even more so about health. Like we didn't even think about health, but the fact that the conventional products have, in many cases, forever chemicals, in many cases, microplastics, and we do not, that's a huge, huge, I think, reason for people to buy our products. They don't, people are really aware and seeing kind of the impacts of toxins in their home and microplastics. They don't want any of this. And so, yes, sustainability is crucial. And in some ways, sustainability is kind of table stakes now. It's not a differentiator. It's just it's a prerequisite. It's a table stake. So what else besides sustainability really sets you apart? And for us, it's really a focus on health and lack of toxicity, lack of microplastics. That is something that I think people care deeply about, and as
mm,
do we.
mm. In today's episode, we speak with Lauren Gropper, founder of Repurpose, a company creating compostable plant-based alternatives to single-use plastic products. Repurpose supports the circular economy by replacing petroleum-based single-use plastics with compostable materials designed to return safely to the earth after use, rather than persist in landfills or within our ecosystems. So what's the larger problem here? Globally, over 400 million tons of plastic are produced each year, with a significant portion of that designed for single use. According to the United Nations Environmental Program, around half of all plastics produced is designed for single use, and only about 9% of plastics ever created has been recycled. The rest of those end up in landfills, incinerated, or leaking into our ecosystems, where it can take hundreds, if not thousands of years to break down. Well, what's the solution here? Repurpose offers compostable alternatives made from plant-based materials that are designed to break down by composting at the end of life. By rethinking everyday items like cutlery, cups, plates, the company reduces reliance on fossil fuel-derived plastics and helps shift consumption towards more regenerative systems. This conversation dives into the pursuit for real impact, how curiosity and conviction can shape an entire new industry, how being the first mover is both an advantage and a challenge, all while building a business that pushes consumers and systems to change. Enjoy. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I'd love to start with just a high-level overview. What problem does Repurpose solve, and how did you identify that?
I think the big problem we're trying to solve essentially is the issue of single-use plastics.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the environmental sort of waste issue, but also microplastics and toxins. So it's a much larger issue than I think, the accumulation of plastic in our environment. It's the accumulation of microplastic in our bodies and toxins in our home. So that's the gigantic problem we're trying to solve, and hopefully, slicing off a little piece of it.
Totally. Where were you in your life when you came across this problem, and how did you find this sort of solution, or at least design Repurpose as a solution for this large problem?
So I had always been really passionate about sustainability and always wanted a career in sustainability. But back then it wasn't exactly like super clear, where the opportunities were. There weren't as many opportunities as there are today. But I was also very interested in design and architecture. So I was able to find this amazing program actually in New York at Pratt that focused on sustainable design. And
Mm,
so it was at their School of Architecture. I studied that and was just so passionate about design, green building, sustainability. I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to be doing. So I actually worked in the green building space for a long time, both with architects and designers, and also with on the construction side and on the sort of the ownership real estate side. So I sort of saw all aspects. And then I had this cool opportunity to come out to LA and work behind the scenes on film and TV sets to look at kind of the design and construction and make it more sustainable. And not only look at kind of like how do we design the sets, because most sets, your traditional set is built very quickly with not the best materials, and then after the filming ends, it's just thrown away. So that in itself is a model that needs to be disrupted, and that has been. But also, you have to look at all aspects of the production. So when I was doing that, I really came across just a huge amount of plastic disposable use. And it wasn't, and nobody really wanted to use these products, but just the nature of production and filming is such that, everything is temporary, transient. You got to move quickly. And, especially if you're on location, there's not a dishwashing service. So you're eating and snacking, et cetera, and drinking all day. So we would be using plastic bottles all day, eating our salads out of a big plastic bowl, using plastic forks. And it just felt like that was an area that could be addressed. And for me, it was really a design problem. So what struck me was sort of like, why are we using petroleum that we dig out of the ground to make into a product that should be just disposable, but we're using a material that's actually designed to last forever? Like, that just makes zero sense. So could we use just a better material? Could we use something that is not harmful to the planet or to our health? That was really the kind of like problem to solve as well at the time. And so it was just something I had thought about. I had found some alternatives back then. And this is back in, 2009. So a long time ago. And the alternatives that were available on the market were just, they just weren't designed very well. They didn't work very well, and they cost a fortune. It was about 3 times the amount of plastic. So it was just a non-starter. It was like, this would be great, but the design needs to improve, the performance needs to improve, and the cost needs to come down. So in the back of my mind, I thought, well, if those 3 things can happen, then this could be something really cool. But it took some time. And I had, at that time when I was doing some research on alternatives, I had met a group in Taiwan. And that group was doing very interesting work in terms of alternatives, because Taiwan had actually outlawed single-use plastics in 2006. So they were ahead of the curve.
That's pretty early.
It was very early. And they had they had great products, but they just weren't kind of ready for the American market. And, at first the thought was, oh, let's just, let's hit Starbucks. Let's hit every large user, every university campus of every corporate campus. Let's attack that. That was sort of the thought of the business. And then it kind of morphed into, we want to make really cool quality products that can be in everybody's homes. And we want to create a consumer brand. And so that's when we really started shifting into, okay, how can we use this technology, which is really interesting. You're using kind of plant starches to make plastic-like polymers that are the building blocks of these products that then become alternatives that look and feel like plastic, but they're not. And then we also use agricultural waste. So the waste of, the agricultural industry that gets upcycled to become what our plates are, for example, our bowls are, we put in our cutlery. So it's actually really cool technology that goes into what these products are, aside from the fact that they don't contain microplastics. They won't break down into microplastics. There's no toxins. They break down in a composter in 90 days. So that's what really excited me, just the technology itself. And then I also got really excited about creating a consumer brand and really getting on retail shelves.
You said you started to approach places like Starbucks and other retailers, and then decided to then pivot towards a consumer brand. Were you not getting the response from retailers, or did you just see a larger market within the consumer packaged goods space?
I think, well, retailers were responsive. I would say it was mostly like the big food service chains. The food service industry was that's where we wanted to start. And yeah, we were up against, they have contracts with existing manufacturers that are 3 years long or what have you. Like, it felt really long and hard to penetrate. Whereas we saw this white space in retail where, could we create a brand on shelves? Meanwhile, both are very hard. Both are really, really tough propositions. But we felt like, okay, there's some white space. Like, why has nobody done this in retail? It's all these legacy incumbent 50-year-old brands that are on shelf. And if a person had a choice to buy something sustainable versus one of these old incumbent brands, I think there'd be a significant segment of the population that would choose the better option. Why is there nothing on shelf? And so that's where we got excited. Like there's some white space here and this is a huge market and we can come in and really disrupt this this category. Much like I think at the time what was starting to happen was you were seeing much more organic produce in retail. You were seeing more kind of natural cleaning for your home. You were seeing more organic baby food, just like all areas of the home where there was better for you, better for the planet kind of alternatives, but not in this category. And so it felt like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if I'm somebody that does buy, organic baby food or natural cleaning, I'm gonna want to buy,
Mm-hmm.
repurpose type products as well, and they're just not available. So that
Mm-hmm.
was that
Mm-hmm.
was where we felt we had an opening and a niche.
Something I've heard you say multiple times is that, and factually back in 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, this was still a burgeoning industry and it wasn't as saturated or even as just more players as there are today. You said that you were ahead of the curve when it came to sustainable products. Looking back now, do you think that that was an advantage or disadvantage for you?
I honestly think it was both. Um,
Mm,
I think trying to pioneer a category or a technology is really hard. It's expensive. It requires a lot of education. You have to bring the consumer along with you. Um,
mm-hmm,
you're not like, riding coattails of another group that has sort of come before you. So it was a challenge. But I think being first to market was also a big advantage, right? Like we were able to kind of claim our stake, claim our space, and take share because we were first. So we were quick to take share because of that. But it is always difficult to be first. Ideally, you're second or third because you can ride some coattails. There's already some consumer education. You're coming in with something just a little bit different. Um, but I think what's interesting is that we've always focused on the product and the product performance and the
mm-hmm,
sustainability and the affordability, those
mm-hmm,
three things. And so we're just so rigorous about how we, our product pipeline and kind of how we go to market with different products and where we go to market and why we go to market and how we price things. And I think that's been just a huge advantage for us because there have been a number of copycats or other companies that have come and go that they might make great products. Many of them make really great products, but the pricing is not, it's just not, going to allow them to penetrate in a mass way. Um, or they have a great price, but the product does not perform very well. So they haven't been able to kind of unlock that sort of secret sauce of hitting those three areas. And that's just something we focused on consistently. And that's why, 15 years later, we're still on shelf and we're in
completely.
1,000 doors. So I think that's
Yeah.
been a huge piece of our success.
No, absolutely. And I want to go back to this component when you speak about affordability, sustainability, functionality, and everything of that nature. But Lauren, before we go too far ahead, I do want to speak about Lauren, the person, and then the entrepreneur. Have you always thought of yourself as an entrepreneur? Did you always see yourself stepping into a role like that, or did it just come about through this journey?
I did not actually, but I think I have some of those traits and tendencies, I guess, that um, entrepreneurs have. A little bit of overly positive thinking, call it a little bit delusional,
Yeah.
some naivete sprinkled in there. I think the wishful thinking. I've always been a bit of a dreamer. Like
Mm,
that definitely is something that is sort of a prerequisite, I think. Um, so that's been helpful in a way because
mhm.
if you talk to entrepreneurs, many of them say like if they would have known what the journey would be like before starting, they may have not taken it.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a bunch of that, and I think I was always like just very driven. I had a lot of kind of like internal drive, um, and it's sort of like a really love problem solving and kind of when I'm passionate about something, I'm just really persistent. So I think
Hmm.
those things, having that kind of persistence, um, that kind of belief in yourself, um, that yeah, that kind of overconfidence, a little naivete goes a long way.
It goes a long way for sure. Was this your first venture, or were you involved in other startups before?
I was involved in other startups, so I'd kind of gotten a taste
Hmm.
prior to this, but never in kind of uh, never in a consumer goods or a product
Yeah.
capacity.
And to that point, I'm really curious to know about your transition from consulting, which, from my understanding, is really the role that you were in when you
Yeah.
were on set in LA and discovering this problem that we just discussed, transitioning into a CPG startup. I mean, it feels like there's a big learning curve between there. Can you speak to that transition that you had to undergo?
I think it was a huge learning curve for me. Like I cannot
Mm,
uh, understate that. Consulting is interesting, and I had worked for a very large architecture firm at the time that I had started Repurpose, as well as I was doing the set design consulting. Um, and that allowed me, like, I needed that in order to start Repurpose because I needed a paycheck and Repurpose could not pay me. So it was nice because consulting allowed me to have a more flexible schedule. So I could do both at once. And I think that's what's really challenging for people that are wanting to start a business. Like, oftentimes, especially if you're bootstrapping, you don't have income as an entrepreneur for long periods of time because you're just getting things off the ground. If there's any revenue at all, it's going into the business. So I needed to have that in order to really get things started and work on Repurpose. And yes, it was a massive learning curve. Like I knew nothing about CPG or consumer goods or anything. I mean, I had to learn it all. And thankfully, I was able to figure out kind of who some wonderful advisors could be and who I could talk to and just to figure out kind of the business model. Some of whom are still with us today. Um, but yeah, I think anything that you know, going
hmm
from one field to another, it's a big learning curve. But if you're really passionate about it, like I was so passionate about it and still am, um,
hmm
that it was just like I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could.
Yeah, and I mean, and you've succeeded. I think not only are you the fact that you're a 15-year-old business, but it's still led by the founder, and is a really testament to who you are as a leader. But to that point, Lauren, I'm curious to know, how would you describe your strengths, your core strengths that you brought to the table as a founder?
My core strengths, I would say, um, we actually did this exercise with a professional. So what came out was, um, it was kind of sort of futuristic vision, um,
Hmm.
problem solving, strategic, positive. I think that combination of strengths, just I would say persistence as well. But yeah, sort of thinking strategically, solving problems creatively,
Hmm.
um, having some sort of futuristic vision, being able to kind of really see around the corner a little bit, especially in this area, in this
Hmm.
one area, maybe seeing what others may not see. Um, that's really, really helped us to start and maybe to continue to lead with innovation and certainly to stay positive and persistent in those more difficult times when things seem overwhelming and difficult.
Which are inevitable in any company's journey,
Oh,
and
mhm.
those components are really emblematic, I think, of a founder and as a leader of an organization. But at the same time, there are things that maybe you, as we all do, we don't have the most strength in, or we lack in. And so I'm curious to know, as you develop this business, how did you fill in those gaps? How did you learn to delegate? And more importantly, how did you find your founding team with Jordan specifically?
Yeah, well, you certainly need great people around you, and I think that's one of the first things that any founder should kind of come to that realization that like you just can't do it alone and you need a great team, and that's what takes you to the next level. There's just no way you can do it all. You're also going to go crazy if you do. Um, so I sort of knew that early on. Um, Jordan, our co-founder, Jordan Silverman, was actually an early investor, um, and he has sort of deeper operational experience. So I thought it would be great to bring him into the business. I've known him and his family since birth. We grew up together in Vancouver. So we've known each other a very long time. Obviously, I trust him with everything. Um, And it's been an incredible partnership because he has really taken on kind of the area of the business that I am not as uh, well versed at, which is supply chain, operations, logistics, warehousing, kind of key components to the business that make things go day in and day out. So that's been amazing, where I've been able to focus more kind of on funding the company, sales, marketing, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
that aspect of it. And then obviously we have an amazing leadership team that handles everything day to day as well, from sales to marketing, ops, finance, everything like that. So it's taken time to get, the right team, and there's been hits, there's been misses, but I think that is how it goes with any kind of business. But I'm beyond grateful for our team and what they do every day. We just wouldn't be here without the team that we have. So, um, I've made mistakes in who I brought and in some cases it's been amazing miracles. Like our earliest employee is still with us, and she's amazing.
That's
So
awesome.
shout out to Sarah Sanders. Yeah.
Shout out to Sarah Sanders, indeed.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think it's a fair, people are what make businesses work. And so having the
Yeah.
right people in place is integral. Um, Lauren, shifting gears a little bit, I like to look at the sustainability component of your business because that's, it's a core part of it. Why focus or emphasize on compostability as the end of life solution for your products rather than recyclability? I find that a lot of people, average consumers, think about recyclability first when they think about sustainable products rather than compostability or biodegradability. Why did you choose compostability?
I think we chose compostability for a number of reasons. And interestingly, we're actually currently focusing our messaging on not just end of life, but really the whole life cycle of the product and what is in the product and how it's made. And specifically more about microplastics, because that is something that people are so concerned about today. I think with recyclability, especially on the plastic side, it's just a myth that plastic gets recycled 100% of the time. It's currently, I believe, it's something like 7 or 8% in the US of plastic is actually recycled. So it felt like, yes, people are familiar with that term and what it is, but does it actually get recycled? Um, Two, we were very interested in using plants as a base material, as a feedstock versus petroleum. That was always kind of from the get-go something that we wanted to do, to focus on material innovation and end of life compostability. And when we started, we believed that, I think, composting infrastructure would come along a little quicker than it has. It's come a long way, but it has a long way to go. Um, and also in the production of compostable products versus their petroleum counterparts, there's significant water savings, like 70% water savings, 65% less CO2 to make the product versus a petroleum product. So from a kind of overall perspective, I think the compostability factor was just a more sustainable option for us and for the consumer. Um, and today, especially more important, because we use plant-based feedstocks, we don't have persistent microplastics in our products. So that's a huge differentiator, versus a plastic recyclable product. I think even if compostability is not widespread and people don't have the option to compost the product, from the production side, it's a more sustainable product, and from a microplastics angle,
Mm-hmm.
I would still always choose the product that doesn't have microplastics versus one that does.
Yeah, no, to that point, your products, generally speaking, where does the impact really lay? Is it from the manufacturing of these? Is there more of an impact on the manufacturing of these products, or is there more of an environmental savings from the end of life state? Can you speak to that?
I mean, I really think it's all. If you look at actually
Mm-hmm.
like the life cycle analysis and where it depends where it's produced and how it's produced. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, our cups are produced at a factory in Taiwan, our partners in Taiwan, and it's a solar powered factory.
Mm-hmm.
So significant savings on the production there from an environmental standpoint. But I know that several counterparts that use some Chinese factories, for example, it's coal burning. So you have to take that into account, right? Um, For the shipping, for example, we do offset that. So we offset with carbon credits, the shipping. Um, that's a piece of it. Some of our products are moving to be made in the USA, so that changes things. But primarily, I think where we're focused today and where we're focused in the future is significantly more on kind of the makeup of the product, the raw material, the microplastics,
Mm-hmm.
the lack of toxicity, no PFAS, et cetera, versus end of life. End of life
Mm-hmm.
still being hugely important, but I think as we communicate to consumers about kind of, or as we learn about what they are most concerned about, they are more concerned about that than they are, sadly, of end of life.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What can you speak to consumers who are aware of the problem, aware of climate change, and want to do something about it? But again, they're not experts in the field. They don't know the details of these things. What messages really resonate with them? And what advice would you give other founders who are creating sustainable products emphasize in their marketing?
I think you do have to meet people where they are. Like if you are too far ahead from a messaging or education point of view, there's just a lack of it. There's an education gap there, and it's going to be problematic or difficult to get a consumer kind of along for the journey. Um, so I think for us, we're currently trying to lead with messages that where people really care. So microplastics, non-toxic, made from plants. That's in its simplest form, you know, that's what we're communicating because that's something people understand. That's something people that care can make an easy swap with. Um, People don't understand life cycle analyses. People don't understand carbon offset necessarily. People don't understand, you know, even compostability. Honestly, I think if
Mm,
you were to survey 100 people on the street right now, I don't think the numbers would be very high for people that know what it is, you know,
yeah.
what happens to it. Um, yeah, I think there's still a lot of education there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. From going back to the emphasis on feedstock and the manufacturing, are you seeing the cost of compostable materials or feedstock come down as this market matures, or are you seeing a fluctuation in that part of your supply chain, given oil prices fluctuating, given wars and other things of that nature?
Yeah, in the today's current environment, yes, we're seeing
Mm,
fluctuation, but I think in general, broad strokes, from when we started to today, yes, the prices have come down just based on supply and demand.
hmm. That makes sense. Um, what's been the biggest operational challenge in scaling your business?
Oh my God. So many.
Yeah.
It's constantly a chicken egg situation,
Hmm.
and that's the life I think of an entrepreneur. You're constantly trying to having to constantly solving for problems that don't have solutions and figuring out, you know, how to do something. It's I'd say there's so many here. It's usually that there's a lack of resources for what you need to do, and you have to operate with that lack of resources. So whether it be team, whether it be um, cash flow, whether it be,
Mm,
you know, proper financing, whether it be materials and product availability, whether it be, you know, marketing, I mean, everything. It comes into play all day. Um, but generally, I would say the under the broader category of challenges, it's really just sort of like not having the right resources for the problem you need to solve and having to solve it with less or inadequate resources. And then, you know, figuring out how to get to, you know, then you get to the next phase or the next level. And maybe you are well resourced, but something else is, you know, it's a little bit of a whack a mole game.
mm, that makes sense. You mentioned something about cash flow and financing. I'm curious to know your experience with investors more broadly in the investing community, how they've approached or responded to a company like yours and other companies who are making similar products, let's say, who are bringing about a product that on a per unit basis is more expensive than the competition, um, uh, given that it's a higher cost input rather relative to plastic and petroleum based stuff. Do they have a hesitation towards businesses like yours? What can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's always a question that comes up in diligence, sort of, uh, how, are you concerned that your pricing is a little higher than conventional? I think we always had data to show that we still did well or were really outperforming the category. And it was really important to show that traction and show that data. So when we went out for funding, we were actually already in the market and we were showing traction. So back when we started, there wasn't a lot of kind of like seed funding for consumer companies. That came a little later. So we just had to kind of bootstrap and figure it out those early years to be able to kind of show some traction. We did have friends and family that came in that just believed in the idea. That obviously we wouldn't be here today without them. But as we brought on more institutional investors, they certainly needed to see that data and that traction, and then they kind of bought into the story. But they also just saw the broader kind of tailwinds. They really believed in sustainability as kind of a broader category and one that was here to stay, and one that was here, that the consumers really cared about, and that the next generation would really prioritize. And so that's, I think, partially what they were investing in, taking a chance on that.
That makes sense. And the fact that you were already in the market and could bring that information to the table is so crucial. And a lot of people don't have that component. I've heard you speak about cost parity between compostable materials and petroleum-based materials. What in your mind needs to happen to get closer to cost parity between the two components?
It's really hard because we are up against, huge incumbent players with very large, scale industries, and we're still kind of definitely niche. I wouldn't say niche, but we're certainly kind of subscale in terms of where these other players are at. So scale is crucial. Legislation is crucial to help bring about that scale. Infrastructure is crucial. So we need kind of a public-private partnership here. The more we can have kind of public sector support in the form of legislation, in the form of tax credits, in the form of anything that can kind of stimulate this piece of the economy and this kind of alternative supply, we're going to need this to be able to get to parity. Or the companies that are kind of providing these kinds of products will have to take kind of lesser margin to be able to get scale in the first place, to be able to kind of compete. But yeah, we are not operating at the same scale. So we will need more support in order to get there.
Yeah. You hit on a key piece, which is regulation and legislation. Is Repurpose involved in discussions with legislators about types of regulations in the United States or in North America to push for a better either composting infrastructure or, of course, impacting any sort of curbing of petroleum-based products or anything adjacent to your business?
Yeah, I think not in an official capacity, but we are part of several trade organizations that work with legislators. So, as a member of those organizations, yes, certainly. And we help advise and comment on various regulations from various agencies where we feel, more information is required, or we can shed light on a problem or solution. So yes, we are. But is it a everyday event? No.
That makes sense. To that point, I'm curious to know where you see composting infrastructure in the United States go in the near future. Do you have hope for its expansion? What's your take on that?
I do have hope for its expansion because our landfills are almost at capacity. So yes, this is something that is needed, especially as we actually start to take greenhouse gas emissions more seriously. Getting food out of landfills and into compost is a crucial solution here. I don't know how much your listeners know, but food waste in landfills is a giant contributor to methane gas and greenhouse gas emissions. So composting is a big solution there. And the more we can divert food waste from landfills, the better. So I think, again, it's going to take, and this is also sort of, it's going to take regulation and legislation, but if it doesn't come at the federal level, certainly it can come at the local and state level. And we're seeing that more, where you're seeing states lead the
Totally.
way. Yeah.
Absolutely. I live here in New York City, and they're making composting mandatory for residential
Yeah.
buildings. There's a whole, talk about infrastructure, there's a whole map of, or let's say throughout the entire city of Brooklyn, there's all these dotted composting bins that you can open up with an app, and it's very user friendly to get there. And so I'm seeing the push happen, at least on a local level where I'm at. And I know there
Nice.
are other places that are doing some similar. You've been in the market for a long time, and Repurpose has expanded to so many retailers. It's a well known brand in this space. What is stopping, in your mind, the incumbent players from copying your business model or creating a sub brand that utilizes that sort of showcases a similar value proposition of a compostable or a bio-based material? Um,
They've done
what's
it.
stopping
They've already
companies like
done
that?
it. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think they're already there, which is something that we worried about in the early days. Like, what's the 800-pound gorilla that's going to wipe us out? And we thought it's just
Mm-hmm.
an incumbent brand that's going to make similar products. And so you have, without naming names, there are many that are there on shelf. And what's very cool is we've gone kind of head to head with them. So, our products are there, and their products are there, and we have won that battle. So we have shown that we sell more. Um, and that's been really exciting to be able to see, like, oh, wow, there's a huge brand here with many, many more resources, and our brand is resonating more. And I will say again, it's because of our focus on the product, our authentic brand story, like all those elements together have really shaped kind of the brand and given consumers a reason to choose Repurpose. And that feels amazing. And that's why we're here 15 years later. So there's not only been, the big incumbents, but also store brands. So
Mm-hmm.
when you see kind of most store brands now are getting really sophisticated in terms of their own brands. So oftentimes this is across all categories, but they have their own brand. Oftentimes it's a brand, it's a name, and it seems like it's a brand, but it's actually, a white label store brand.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best to do it is Target. Target does a great job of kind of like creating all these own brands that look like and feel like a brand, but it's their store brand. And so in the case of Target, in the case of Walmart, in the case of many of these larger retailers, they have an own brand that does products like ours as well. So not only are we up against the big incumbents, but the own brands that take share as well. So, we continually have to prove that we deserve a seat at the table, that we have
Mm-hmm.
consumers that believe in us and love our product, and to be able to produce unique items that maybe these others don't make. So,
Mm-hmm.
more and more we're focused not only on material innovation, but on form factor innovation and how can we be different and what sets us apart? What are we doing that
Mm-hmm.
looks, feels, gives us a reason for people to be like, oh, I love that brand. They do such great products, or, you know, that's what we're trying to do, not just be a me too.
No, absolutely. And well, again, I just shout you out for being a leader in the space. Um, if everything goes well, and
Yeah. Fingers
throw that
crossed.
one out.
That's okay.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Everything will go well because the fact that you've been here for 15 years is indicative of that you will be here for much longer. And the fact that you've been able to sustain so much pressure from different sides, right, from a supply chain side, from the increased competition, etc. And I think also at the same time, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The educational component of your brand has had to evolve as well. The market looked very differently 15 years ago, 10 years ago than it does now, and how you educate and what you say to consumers is very different. I'd love to hear what is the biggest difference you've noticed and what the biggest difference Repurpose has had to put forward when it comes to educating consumers now versus when you started.
There's a huge difference, I think, honestly. I think when we started, we were so focused on what we cared about, what we thought, which was the
Mm,
sustainability factor in compostability and end of life. And after getting to know who our consumer really is and what they care about now, really the message is even more so about health. Like, we didn't even think about health. But the fact that the conventional products have, in many cases, forever chemicals, in many cases, microplastics, and we do not, that's a huge, huge, I think, reason for people to buy our products. People are really aware and seeing kind of the impacts of toxins in their home and microplastics. They don't want any of this. And so, yes, sustainability is crucial. And in some ways, sustainability is kind of table stakes now. It's not a differentiator. It's just it's a prerequisite. It's a table stake. So what else besides sustainability really sets you apart? And for us, it's really a focus on health and lack of toxicity, lack of microplastics. That is something that I think people care deeply about, and as do we.
100%. I think that's a great takeaway for anyone looking to create in this space and bring to market a sustainable product. There needs to be more than just sustainability within the value proposition, and
Yeah.
what you're doing really hits on multiple heads at once. Lauren, my last question to you is, what does success look like for you in the next 5 years, both personally and professionally?
Wow. Well, success professionally would be just, continue to see Repurpose grow, expand the product line, expand where we are sold, just kind of be that ubiquitous brand. That's very exciting to me. Personally, I would love nothing more than to see, Repurpose succeed in many ways, all the ways. And, can I ride off into the sunset? That would be great. Yes.
Fingers crossed you will. Fingers crossed you will. Well, Lauren, again, I appreciate your time. This has been such an interesting conversation and really filled with knowledge. I know our listeners are going to get a lot of this. So I want to acknowledge you for what you're doing and what you've done in the past as well. I think it's really not just impressive to bring about a sustainable business, but to be a market leader and to bring something that no one else has seen before, and have other people ride in your coattails, putting that out there. Power to you. And again, we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It means a lot, and really appreciate chatting with you today.